Men's Health Month, and I really wanted to focus on this topic because it's something I don't know a lot about. But just a little bit about me. I'm your moderator today. I'm Jennifer Hainline, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I work with the Louisiana Public Health Institute and the Louisiana Campaign for Tobacco-Free Living. And this particular topic is going to focus on looking at masculinity, in particular, mental health related to masculinity, and how big tobacco is really shifting their focus in how to hook young men on nicotine products. So that's the topic, and that's what we're going to move forward on. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So we're happy you're joining us. We want to thank the Louisiana Cancer Research Center. They provide a great deal of supervision and funding for our programming, and we're part of Healthy Community Coalition and, of course, Louisiana Public Health Institute. And we work together with our communities in grassroots efforts to try to reduce tobacco rates, use, and we try to promote cessation for those who are addicted to nicotine. Go ahead. Okay, so this is just a little bit about who we are. We have goals and how we accomplish these things. We focus on prevention with youth. We try to eliminate secondhand smoke exposure through promoting smoke-free communities, getting smoking out of all workplaces, including bars and bingo halls and casinos, and promote quitting or cessation, tobacco cessation. And then we look at eliminating disparities. And then we want to do this throughout the state. So that's a little bit about who we are. And I'm going to go through next just a little bit of information about tobacco and nicotine, just so you have that. But this is the learning objectives we've got for today. And hopefully you saw that when you registered. So that's gonna be our focus. We can go on to next. And we will administer a survey at the end of our presentation because we really want to know how you feel about this and what other topics you'd like to hear about. Our panelists today, who I'm very, very excited that they've both taken the time to be here with us. So Zach Rosati is a project coordinator with the National Behavioral Health Network. I'm going to say a little bit more about him right before he speaks and gives us his information that he specializes in. And we have Justice Bell. He just graduated from high school. He's actually at his university that he's going to be starting in the fall, University of Louisiana Monroe, and he's at orientation this week. So I appreciate Justice taking time to give his perspective on what it's like growing up as a young man in today's world. Go ahead and go next. Go ahead. So the data that we're looking at is the rates of tobacco use that we had been seeing declines in tobacco use overall. When vapes really hit the market, it's probably about 10 years ago now, we started to see an increase in vaping rates. And then we had nicotine pouches. There's always been smokeless tobacco through chew and dip and those kinds of things. But we've started to see an increase in the use of these smokeless tobacco products, particularly with men. And when we look at sexual orientation or race or gender, we've got about 29% of white men and 24% of black men make up the smokers in our overall smoking rate in the state. So men typically are the higher users of tobacco products. And so we're here talking about men's health and we care about men. We want them to be healthy. And so that's why we want to talk a little bit more about this and how to keep our young men off of tobacco products and away from nicotine addiction. So go ahead and go to the next. Just as a quick mention, there's nothing healthy in a vape or a cigarette. There's not one health product, no matter what anybody says. Anything in these products is meant to harm. Nicotine does have an immediate impact on the sensation of lessened anxiety, decreased tension, but when nicotine wears off, that comes back and sometimes in greater extent. And I'm going to let Zach get a little bit more into the harms of that. But you're seeing what is in these two products. They're cancer-causing elements, and then there's also many other chemicals that are in these products. Go ahead and go next. And I just wanted to make a mention, we're having more research done and data coming in related to vaping. So this does not apply to ZYNs. This doesn't apply because those are not inhaled, the smokeless tobacco. However, when we're talking about youth, we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about vaping and the harms of vaping. And so, looking at the lung of someone who's been vaping, we see significant damage to those lungs. So, it's good that we've got more research coming in on that. But we also know that nicotine itself is harmful, not only to the physical body, but to mental health. So, understanding the impact of nicotine, we know that nicotine increases heart rate, blood pressure. It can cause trouble with focusing, learning, and attention, which, of course, in school, Justice can attest to that. Those three items are very, very important. And then can lead to mental health problems, including anxiety disorders and depression. So we know that nicotine alone has very negative health effects and mental health impacts. Go ahead and go to the next. So I'm going to turn it over to Zach Cruzati. He is a public health professional committed to removing barriers to high quality person-centered care. I'm super excited that he's taken time to join us because he currently serves as project manager for the National Behavioral Health Network for Tobacco and Cancer Control at the National Council for Mental Well-Being, where he spearheads training and technical assistance initiatives that support organizations in reducing the impact of tobacco and cancer among people experiencing mental health and substance use challenges. Just spot on for what we're wanting to talk about today. Zachary combines clinical experience with public health systems expertise to translate evidence into practical solutions that protect communities and promote long-term well-being. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Zach and I will be quiet.
Sounds good. Thanks so much, Jennifer. Hello, everybody. I'm really excited to be here. Thanks for having me. I would say I don't consider myself a clinician. I did start my career as a registered nurse, but then I transitioned into public health, and have feel like my nurse life was forever ago. So I'm here to talk to you today about an emerging public health concern, which is nicotine pouch use amongst school-age boys. And during my part of the presentation, we're going to talk about nicotine pouches and understand what they are and why they appeal to young people. We will review the physical and mental health impacts, focusing on school-age boys, and we will also learn practical strategies to support young people with nicotine recovery. Next slide, please. Just a quick word on the network. The National Behavioral Health Network for Tobacco and Cancer Control is a CDC-funded initiative designed to reduce tobacco and cancer-related health imbalances for people experiencing mental health and substance use challenges. The views that I express are my own, and I don't have any conflicts of interest to disclose. Next slide, please. Alrighty, so nicotine pouches. These are a relatively new commercial product, and as the name suggests, they are a small fibrous pouch that is full of a number of products and chemicals, including nicotine, flavoring, sweeteners, stabilizers, and other ingredients. And the nicotine in these pouches can be derived from the tobacco plant, or it can also be synthetic, completely synthesized in a lab. And that does have some marketing considerations that we'll talk about here in a little bit. The product is designed to be put in the mouth, placed between the lip and the gum. There's no chewing or spitting that is required, and the chemicals are absorbed through the mucosa of the mouth, being absorbed directly into the bloodstream. And nicotine pouches entered the US market in 2016, and they have steadily increased in popularity. And then in 2025, the FDA authorized marketing for several products, including flavored pouches, which is a concerning departure from what has been the standard for years around nicotine product advertisements. Next slide. So who do we see using these pouches? Based on the 2024 National Youth Tobacco Survey, nicotine pouches are the second most commonly used nicotine product by young people who reported previous use of nicotine within the past 30 days, and e-cigarettes are the most commonly used product. Whenever we look at middle school aged kids, we see that the use amongst males and females is pretty similar. Male students using it just a touch more than female counterparts. But whenever we move into high school, that's whenever we see a substantial increase in use amongst male students, and the use of from female students stayed pretty same from middle school age. Some people may look at that number and say, Zach, it's just, 4% of students. That's not that big of a deal, right? And what I would say to that is that this sterile number that's on a PowerPoint slide represents hundreds of thousands of young people who are being marketed a toxic product and who are potentially facing a lifetime of addiction. So I think that is worth investigating and doing something about. And I will say that the National Youth Tobacco Survey is an invaluable resource and shares a lot of really great data, but there are some inherent limitations. For example, participation in the survey is completely voluntary, and there are opt-out options at the student, the parent, and the school level. And so what that means that entire school districts may choose not to participate, and that could coincide with areas where there's higher use amongst young people. Additionally, certain school types were excluded, including alternative schools, schools that were run by the Department of Defense, and vocational schools. And this could also coincide with schools that have different habits around use. And then, of course, there's stigma around nicotine use, and that could be influencing what is reported. And so I say all of that to say that we're working with the best available data, but rates among young people could be higher than what we're seeing on paper. Next slide. And so why is this important? I think first and foremost is that despite what tobacco companies would like you to think, there's no such thing as a safe nicotine product. Combustible products, that is, products that you light and inhale the smoke, are not the only products that cause harm. Nicotine itself is a toxic chemical with significant physiological effects on the body and the mind. Nicotine is a highly addictive substance. Nicotine products are expensive and quitting is hard. And addiction is a prison that traps many people, oftentimes for their entire life. Tobacco and nicotine use is primarily established during adolescence. And I would say I can't think of anybody who I've talked to who said, oh, I started using these products in my 30s. It's frequently when I was a kid or when I was in high school or I was in college. And that just shows how this time period is so critical in engaging with young people, for them to understand the importance around prevention and to support them in recovery if they are using nicotine. Nicotine can lead to the use of other tobacco or nicotine products, which increases exposure to risk. The use of nicotine by young people can harm brain development. The brain is developing until the mid-20s. And so this is a critical time, and nicotine affects that. And finally, on this slide, youth are being targeted, which is concerning. Next slide. All right, so nicotine pouches, the majority of the brands are made from big tobacco companies with huge marketing budgets. Reports show that upwards of over $8 billion a year are spent on promoting these products. And there's a well-known and well-documented history of these companies targeting youth. Um, Whenever we see labels such as smoke free, that diminishes the perceived risk. And then we do also see labels such as tobacco free, and that ties back to what I said earlier about nicotine can be synthesized in a lab. And so when that happens, companies can say tobacco free on their label, and that again disassociates people from the understood concern from tobacco products and health risks. We also know that nicotine pouches are designed in a way that appeal to youth. There's a long-standing understanding that flavors are integral to young people trying and using nicotine products. The packaging is discreet. There is no offensive odor, there's no chewing, there's no spitting. It's easily concealable. And the packaging looks very much like a package of candy or mints or gum. And then also, these products are framed in a way that help with mental health challenges. But we know that, in fact, nicotine does the opposite. It does not just increase focus or reduce stress. It does the opposite. Especially when exposed during adolescence, it affects parts of the brain that control attention, learning, mood, and impulse control. Nicotine withdrawal is associated with irritation, poor mood, restlessness, difficulty concentrating, anxiety, depression. And then also the stigma around it and the potential for having to conceal from your parents can lead to anxiety and strain relationships. So just all around, I don't see any way to where it helps. Next slide. And so why are young men using nicotine pouches more than other groups? And that has to do with social marketing. This product has been adopted by biohackers or folks that think there's a magic pill that can help you with virtually everything, that you can trick your body into working better for you. And that's based on pseudoscience. Unfortunately, young people are being inundated with these claims that this product can solve all of your problems. High school is a time that young men are juggling many things: sports, school, jobs, social lives, dating, preparing for their future. And it's also a time where guys feel an intense pressure to succeed and are every day in a room full of hundreds of other students to be compared to. It gives me anxiety just thinking about it. I was not one who loved high school. I did not like it. But it makes sense that young people will be attracted to something that promises to help them in all of those areas. Additionally, around tech bro culture, that's something that glamorizes the use of nicotine pouches. And today, whenever you think of someone who's rich or cool or successful, you likely think of someone who works for a big tech firm. Grind culture, coupled with this idea that you need to always be on and giving 150% all day, every day, has created a space for nicotine pouches to seem advantageous. It's common to read stories about some tech startups stocking nicotine pouches in their company vending machines to boost productivity. And if that is what you see who you consider successful people to be doing, that's what you're going to emulate. One problem is that the effects are semi-based on reality. Nicotine causes the release of chemicals in the brain that make people feel good and focused, but what they don't tell you is that your body rapidly builds dose tolerance, meaning that you don't get the high or the pleasure after you've been using the product for a while, and that can potentially contribute to increasing the use or switching to other products. And then regarding masculinity marketing, tobacco companies are not doing anything new. Rather, they're using tried and true strategies to promote the use of their products. And unfortunately, that's because these strategies are effective. The age of the Marlboro Man is well known, and masculine imagery was leveraged to entice men to use nicotine products. Musicians, athletes, cowboys, military men were common tropes that garnered appeal. And additionally, desire and female attention has been a marketing ploy that's often used. Today, masculinity looks different than it did 50 years ago, but we're seeing the same tactics be utilized. Here on the screen, a cool looking dude on a motorcycle doing a road trip. That sounds fun. I don't know how nicotine has to play to that, but this seems interesting. A fit dude doing a pretty rad yoga pose. I mean, if nicotine pouches could make me do that, sign me up. And then here, there's very common imagery around beautiful women, sex sells. We've seen that in many products. And whenever I think about video games and beautiful women, the demographic that comes to my mind of who loves that is young men. And also, these three advertisements for nicotine pouches were on social media. And that's a place where it's really hard to regulate who come across these ads. And that's likely by design. Next slide, please. So looking at some of the barriers to treatment and engagement, we've talked a little bit about the social factors. We'll touch a little bit more here. Peer influence is a huge factor. I think it's a universal truth that really everybody, but especially young people, want to fit in with their peers. And they're in a highly social environment, interacting with dozens of other students every day. Another factor is high rates of stress. And I think that's a concerning issue all in itself. I would say if you don't think that young people are stressed out, and I would say they are stressed out rightfully so, I would say you're not talking to young people. Stress is a key factor, especially when there's a product that's being marketed to help you with that. The lack of perceived harm, these labels that say tobacco free, smoke free, it really diminishes the idea that this is something that can negatively impact me. And oftentimes with young people, you also see a perceived control over use. People may say, I could quit anytime that I want, or I just do it for this, or I'm going to do it for, studying for finals, and then I'll be done. Unfortunately, addiction can take hold very quickly, especially with nicotine, which is highly, highly addictive. When looking at clinical factors, there is inconsistent screening. A study reported that less than half of adolescents who had a doctor visit within the past year were screened for tobacco use. And additionally, not every person is screened equally. White, female, late adolescent people with private health insurance were screened the most, and other groups of folks had significantly less screening done. Additionally, we know that there are gaps in provider knowledge. A survey of medical providers demonstrated significant gaps in knowledge around diagnostic criteria for tobacco use disorder, cessation treatment efficacy, evidence-based counseling modalities, and FDA-approved medications. Additionally, there are differences in treatment. Young people are not just small adults, but they have different needs. They have different things that they respond to better. So you can't just copy and paste what works well for adults to young people and expect that to work well. And then looking at systemic factors, this is a new product. There's a limited body of research. I would say happily, I finished this presentation a couple of weeks ago, and since then I've seen several new articles and toolkits coming out, which is great. But there's not 50 years of evidence that we can look to and know what works best. And then also there's limited guidance around medication support, and we'll talk a little bit more about that on the next slide. So looking at clinic-oriented recommendations, the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends the ACT model to address youth cessation. On the blue circle, and y'all will get these slides after, it has a really great flowchart that providers could use to really understand what are the steps of asking counseling and treatment and when you use certain modalities. But step one is going to be to ask, and you should, or clinicians and health providers should be asking about tobacco and nicotine use with every patient at every encounter. The American Academy of Pediatrics recommends screening starting at age 11, and the American Thoracic Society recommends starting at age 10. Regarding counsel, you should advise every person who uses tobacco or nicotine to quit. And an effective strategy would be then and there, recommend that they set a quit date. And I think that's an effective strategy, especially whenever you have young people who say, I could quit anytime. This isn't a problem. What I would recommend is saying, then show me. Let's give it a shot and show me, and we can see if it's a problem. And then after that, you can't just stop with recommendations. You of course have to link to other treatments. With many things, an approach that uses varying tactics is most effective. So you want to connect people with behavioral treatment support, use pharmacological support when indicated, and link people to follow up. It's kind of tricky around the pharmacological support as there's not a medication approved for youth use. However, it can be used in off-label use, and there are some guidelines here to help with that. Again, I think there's people who could better talk about the medication than I can, but there's a lot of good resources on this slide that I recommend you take a peek at. And I would say, I think if you're an educator, if you're a public health person, if you're a trusted adult, the key takeaway is this is a collaborative effort. We should collaborate with providers and prescribers to find what works best for the person because it's not a one-size-fits-all model. Next slide. All right. A couple practical strategies I'd like to talk about. Well, first, I'd like to say what doesn't work. I think it's well known that punitive strategies are not effective. Um, Shame is not effective. Ignoring the problem is not going to work. And also implementing solutions without youth input is not effective. What we should be doing is empowering young people to make decisions about their health and well-being. And I think the first step of that is building trust. You should strive to be a trusted adult who young people feel comfortable and want to share their challenges with you and seek support. Creating open lines of communication is pertinent. Making information accessible is also very important. Again, in the idea that young people are not just small adults. You can't take a flyer that you would for an adult and put it in a school and say, job well done. Young people have different concerns. Young people have different fears. They have different priorities. So you should make sure that whatever content you have available is relevant to young people. And then also investing in youth-led initiatives is a big factor. I think it's whenever there are the means and the tools and the resources, we can trust that the kids are going to be all right. But we do need to make sure that those tools are there and that we can remove the barriers and the roadblocks and then work in a collaborative way. Another strategy, and I think the Truth Initiative has done a really good job with this, is playing to the idea that people don't like to be manipulated. So I think it's effective to shine attention to the fact that big tobacco companies are trying to trick young people into a lifetime of addiction. And then also, big tobacco companies rely on common social tropes because peer influence is an effective driver of behavior. So one recommendation could be to flip the script and work with young people to identify youth advisors, youth advocates, youth ambassadors who can model behavior such as rejecting nicotine products. And then one thing, it's for free because I don't have it here on the slide, is whenever you're thinking about developing policies for your facility, remember that language is really important. And it's easy to take advantage of a loophole. So when you're talking about uh, policies for nicotine, use the word nicotine because, as you can see, there are tobacco-free labels. So if you say tobacco-free space, that's an opening to say, well, this isn't tobacco, so that doesn't count. If you're talking about, no smoking, well, there's lots of nicotine products that don't use smoke. So catering your language to meet the needs is something that's also very important. Next slide. All right, a few things to summarize. Nicotine pouches are new and they're highly addictive, backed by $1 billion industry. And also, we're learning together. This is a new product. Help protect youth by sharing what strategies have worked in your community, and that builds to the knowledge base. And then people can apply what they learn from you into their community, change it a little bit, make it work better for them. So the key takeaways, I would like to say again, no nicotine product is safe. Tobacco industries continue to target young people. Social marketing directed at school-age boys contributes to higher use. Research on youth treatment is still an emerging and evolving field. Youth have unique treatment considerations, and that youth-led initiatives are important strategies to prevent use and promote quitting. The next two slides are a bunch of references that I hope you can take a peek at whenever you get these slides. And with that, I'll pass it over, I think, to you, Jennifer.
Thank you, Zach. That was amazing because I mean, you just brought us the full scope from, just the content and information. And I love the visuals looking at, I'm a visual person. We talked about that before, but I love the visuals of looking at how they grab people. Big tobacco and marketing is just such an impressive field. We know they spend millions and millions and millions on marketing their products and seeing those images of, the man with the motorcycle, which represents freedom and independence. And then you see, yeah, I mean, oh gosh, that was good stuff. And I really also, one of the things that I've noticed as well too, when we talk about tobacco is even though they've classified, vaping and whatever as tobacco products, the average person out there who doesn't work in this field wouldn't consider a nicotine product a tobacco product. So yeah, so Justice, I see you nodding. Thank you for that validation. So yeah, talking about nicotine is really important because there's plenty to talk about with cigarettes, right? I mean, there's so much nastiness in that. So you could talk about how cancer causing out. So we kind of didn't talk about nicotine for decades. Now, we're able to talk a lot more about that as research has come out. I wanted to let y'all know I'm having trouble with the chat window. So if you guys have questions or just chats, you can put it in the Q&A unless you're able to put it in the chat. I can't see the chat, but and I'm not able to put in the chat to y'all. So I apologize for that. But I do see there's a question for you, Zach. And so it's, have you observed connections between traditional masculine norms such as self-reliance, risk-taking, or emotional suppression and tobacco use or quit outcomes? Great question, Daphne. Thank you.
Yeah, I think these norms or these social ideas around masculinity are something that tobacco companies are very aware of. Um, I think, what is a man's man? Someone who loves beautiful women and loves to get on the motorcycle and just go out and be free, as kind of you alluded to, Jennifer. So I think that these are areas that are being utilized to sell a product. Um, I think it's more tricky to, I think, use masculinity as a means to recover from nicotine. And I think the person who figures out how to do that, I'd love to hear from it. But a lot of those times, some of those ideas are a little bit toxic, and we want to kind of break away from those. Um, I think if we can kind of allude back and reframe what is masculinity. For me, masculinity is community, self-respect, taking care of your family, and these things that are very, very positive that don't have to do with don't share your emotions. Use this to focus so you can work for 80 hours a week. I think if we can reframe what masculinity is, then we could potentially have some success in leveraging the idea of masculinity towards recovery.
Great. Thank you so much. There's something that you mentioned, and that's youth empowerment and really working with youth to speak to youth, or especially younger generation. And so we're going to transition now, moving to our talking with Justice Bell. And if you all have other questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. I know Zach had some really great content. We will share slides after the webinar, and you'll get that survey, and we'll share those slides so you can get the great content that was there. But can we go to the next slide here, Haley? And then so just to introduce Justice, I had the pleasure of just kind of getting to watch him from afar. He goes to a high school in Monroe, Louisiana, and such a presence. Justice has an amazing presence. I know he's on the speech and debate team, but he did a lot of the events when we have pep rallies and things like that. So great stage presence as well. It looks like someone's coming into him. You're good. You're good. So this is a little bit about him. I just grabbed from his social media page. So some of that's he's a little, he was on speech and debate for more than 2 years and captain of that and did quiz bowl. Smart, smart young man. So thank you for joining us, Justice. Kind of what's your reaction to what Zach said, and just give us a little bit about your perspective on what he shared and how that relates to what you've seen.
Okay, hey everybody. My name is Justice Bill, like she said, and it's an honor to be here. I already pretty much speak for the youth. Not really. I haven't spoke about nicotine and tobacco and just I guess vape use in general. Not that specifically, but just overall, to encourage the youth to do the right thing, the most healthy thing, and just with Mr. Zach's presentation. Um, First, it was very educating, and then it also resonated as well. Because like the things that he's saying is the same stuff that I think about and see, like with the ads and how they pander, to certain demographics, or just pander to like toxic masculinity and teenagers and things like that. And then in the sense where the ads are like warning, nicotine is a very, dangerous drug and stuff like that, very addictive. And then, then it's like that's like pretty small, and then it's just a big old nice looking great looking advertisement, or like some very very funded and very quality ads, just on TV and stuff like that. So his presentation, was just it was really 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 good. I really enjoyed it, and it really resonated, and I think that it's very very valid and very relevant in today's time.
Thanks, Justice. So, thinking about your time growing up in the not too distant past, for you as a young man, what were the expectations from either parents or teachers or peers regarding, you being a young man in particular, navigating through the world? Were there sports expectations? Were there expectations for you to be macho or to fight or things like that? Can you share a little bit with us?
Okay, yes, yes, yes. So, I am glad, I am blessed that my parents did not, force me to go through sports and stuff like that to necessarily prove my masculinity. Just throwing the football outside with my dad, and doing other things like working out, him teaching me how to fight and some boxing tips and things like that. I think that and just like how to take care of the household, take care of my sister, take care of my mom whenever he's not there. I'm young, so I'm the man of the house, if he's not there. So just small things like that. I think those were the most healthy things, and those are also the more valuable things. Now, when I went to my grandmother's house, I had two older uncles, and they had like bulldogs and stuff like that, and we were scared of them, me and my cousins, and they were like, "You got to be a man, you got to be a soldier," and things of that nature. So I kind of grew up with that influence as well, and it kind of led me down to a deep and dark path because I was thinking I'm not man enough because I'm not trying to fight a bulldog, at the ripe age of 6 years old. So just that and just other things, but that I with my uncles, that it was a pretty big influence, and it was a pretty bad influence, which led me to carry some toxic tendencies that I had to, get over my freshman year gladly, sooner than later. So yeah.
So when you, in thinking about your friends or just even not necessarily friends, but people you've interacted with and kind of walked alongside throughout your K through 12, kind of your journey up through high school, did you see some of the other guys struggling with, or they may not have been struggling, but kind of adopting some of those masculine traits or tropes? Like, I think about like, you got to be the hunter and you got to be the football player and you got to be strong and you've got to do those things. Have you seen that? Have you seen that struggle? What is it from your perspective that you see going on?
Yes, I've seen that. I mean, I'm pretty sure like everybody in my grade could attest to it. Even like the girls, they see it. Just me personally, and pretty much like all the other dudes around me. If you didn't play jackpot or basketball or things like that at recess, excuse me, then you wouldn't be seen as masculine, or as masculine, as the ones who did, and especially in like third grade. Man, I did not get some girls because I missed out on some opportunities for that because I just seemed more nerdy. I was interested in it as well, but I just didn't play it as much, and I'd seen more nerdy, um, and with just how the world is. You have to be the, like you said, the hunter type, the go-getter. You have to be all strong and macho, even though we can barely develop muscle, at the age of 10. We just have that expectation with us. And I've some of my friends, some people that I have been friends with, because sadly we have to cut off our friendship because they're still going down a deep path, and it's continued over and over, and it's really done a bad deal to a lot of people's self-esteem. They carry those same things with them, like me with my, I guess, girl problems and things like that in third grade. Some people take those things to heart very, very, very hard, harder than others. And you can see just the impact on it, in high school and things like that. And, those people are usually more susceptible to fall into peer pressure, which actually, leads to vapes, nicotine, and smoking and stuff like that. So, yeah.
So I'm sorry, Justice, but my mother heart when I heard third grade went, what? What are we? But listening to you say that though, I mean that's real. And you think about third grade and dating, it's kind of silly when you think about like what can you actually do when you're dating in third grade, that kind of thing. However, the
Yeah.
impact and how you've carried it since then is really significant in talking about that's that kind of thing that's just in the back of your head. They're like, well, am
Yeah.
I good enough? Will girls like me? Well, and it was third grade. I mean, that shouldn't have even been anywhere in your mind, but it is part of the society. It is part of the culture. I've got a young man, my son, that, I know that that's always kind of been around him, and you kind of wonder, what's wrong with me or what should I be doing differently? And so, it's interesting for you to talk about that and how that kind of still carried through as a question, and wondering what does that mean for me as a guy, if I'm not pulling the girls, so to speak. So then when you have those kinds of challenges, so like that example, did you ever talk to any of your buddies about it, or what did it just kind of become a joke, or how did you address this, what I would call a mental health challenge, something that just nags at you or really bugs you, or even the bigger things that you might maybe struggled with through your lives? What is the comfort level of talking to your guys about that kind of stuff?
Okay. And then I really like this question actually because we do some pretty funny stuff now. But back then, around the third grade, elementary area, we just all suffered together. Like we because there was really nobody to talk to about it because everybody, like all the same kids, were kind of on the same wave, and all of us just like accepted it. And we were just like, bro, we're just not cool enough, So we kind of carried that on to like middle school. Then everybody just started evolving, and now, the nerds or whatever, they get more attention, or they get the proper attention because people start realizing that they're humans too, and things of that nature. But once we got to high school, or I say late middle school, we started, as people started to just grow and develop and just realize how life actually is. um we kind of just got past it because it was all dumb anyways, and we started making jokes about it. Like, we were like, what's one I do? I'm pretty sure you know Cortland, but we just kind of make, like, I guess, like toxic masculinist satire jokes in a sense, where it's like, bro, you don't have three cars, or you're not riding a shark, at 5 a.m. You're not taking a cold plunge at 5 a.m. in the morning, and not smoking a cigar at 6 years old. You're not man, and stuff like that. So it's like, we kind of just make fun of it now, pretty much, and it's fun.
It sounds
So
like you
yeah.
fell in with a really good group of people around you. I'm sure that's a lot by design too. This is why I love this kid. He's you got a good head on your shoulders for sure.
Thank you.
So when I think about the high school, I think about one person in particular who is a star on the football team, and my understanding was this particular football player uses a smokeless tobacco, uses Zins or something of that nature, and tried to quit and then lost, like the team lost the football game that week. Um,
Mm.
and so people are like, get the kid back on the Zin, so it just is curious to me, like, where do you think is the pressure for those guys, that think about people who are using these products, whether it's the vapes or particularly the Zins and the smokeless tobacco? Where do you see that pressure coming from?
Yeah, so football already, that's regarded as a very, very masculine and physical sport. So I would just say, by culture and by nature, it's likely for, I guess, tobacco and Zins and nicotine and things of that nature to have more influence in that area, that arena, because of, just the atmosphere with it, because it's already associated with masculinity and stuff like that, and in football, so it just fits right in. But the with the pressure with it, even though, there are reasons, the reasons don't entirely justify or say, or validate. And, although he may use Zens and other things, um, I think there's still a danger to the health of them, and that we should, as a community, we should encourage him to stop, because I think that you know, even though, he's winning or he's possibly winning the games, doing good and great, he shouldn't suffer or kind of destroy his health for our, personal enjoyment. And I think, since a lot of drugs stimulate and calm the nervous system, this same energy and motivation, is already inside you. It's just stimulated or calmed, and you're just focused in it. So I think that, it's about really finding the obstacles and the just the things that are in your way and within you, rather than, using something or using a tool or using it as a crutch. So yeah.
That's a great perspective. I really like how you frame that. And I really think that you should just skip the 4 years and they should give you your degree in psychology because I can see where that is coming from. My goodness. Um, yeah, I think you're right. And I think that, as a culture, not seeing the harms that nicotine can cause. I know I got a call actually from an athletic director a few years back, from local university saying we've got these athletes using these nicotine products and it's harming, like it's compromising their outcome in terms of their sport and they're just not hitting the numbers like they used to. And we're seeing that over and over that athletes use it because they get this short-term boost, perhaps, but in the long run, it's actually diminishing their numbers, whether it's their run time or, their stamina, those kinds of things. So we for sure see that. Well, what other things do you think are important in talking about, mental health in particular for young men? We've talked about kind of how the nicotine affects some of that, but is there anything else that you wanted to share from your perspective that you thought would be important for folks and other adults to think about when, talking to young folks about mental health and or nicotine use?
I'd say peer pressure and toxic masculinity, which is really the kind of like the root of it all, because it's just simply like um an imbalance, kind of it's already wrong, and that's like the basis for a lot of things. So, we're already on the wrong plane, we're already off balance pretty much. Um, and oftentimes, or really all the time, you see men and they don't want to be, seen as weak or frail, and because like that's what they're all about. They're masculine, they got to be strong and stuff like that. So they often fall into peer pressure, just to fit in. And I've definitely seen that. I have like a numerous examples, but I have this one good friend that I had, and he was right with us, making fun. He was like making fun of it all, and even smoking. He was like, I personally wouldn't make fun of people for smoking, but he was outright like like he would just be like, bro, I would never smoke in my life. You going to, like, he was telling people they're gonna die from cancer, like all type of stuff. I was like, bro, okay. But sophomore year, is he started playing basketball and stuff like that. And I guess some of those people may have been involved with it, and he got influenced. And he's the odd one out and he wants to fit in, new guys, stuff like that. Really wants to play basketball, really wants people to like him. So, he's going to try his best to fit in. And man, it's been downhill, like ever since then. Like he's not the same anymore. It's very, very sad too, because it's like his life is like drained from him and stuff like that. So yeah, I think just a lot of this is caused by, or I think peer pressure and toxic masculinity. Those are some very, very, very big things. Because the thing with toxic masculinity is like it's a lot of stress and a lot of pressure, and for younger men or young boys. because it's really boys too. Like you like 4 years old, and like they expect you to start lifting weights and stuff like that. I know some people, their households are very very big on it. And it's kind of like they want you to be all macho and stuff like that, and pretty much be like a caveman, but cavemen made fire with tools and stuff like that. They want you to make fires with the ash on your hands because it's not masculine to wear lotion, you know, and they want you to, and just the friction on your hands. So it's like, uh, that pretty much, it's just so irrational. So yeah.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that perspective. And I think, it's really, I appreciate more with social media and things like that because if you're looking for the justice perspective, which I'm gonna put it as the justice perspective, I think you can find it, but it also depends on what you're looking for in social media. We're going to go ahead and move on, and I do appreciate Daphne for putting a multitude of resources in there. And of course, again, we do have resources prepared that we'll send out. But wanted to go ahead and move to the next slide, Haley. Kind of think about wrapping up and think about the any other questions that y'all might have. Let me wade through. I know there were a lot of other resources shared. Doesn't look like anybody else had any questions. I think. Let me think. Zach, I know I sent you some questions kind of leading up to our session here. But what do you think when we talk about, how to reach young men and perhaps young men who are growing up in a household where the value is placed on appearing, strong and in control, and somebody who always has to be, more of that trope of masculinity. What do we as public health professionals need to be doing about this topic?
Yeah, great question. I think we should try to build channels of communication. And I think maybe less as public health professionals, but just as people in our communities, because we are professionals, but we also live and are surrounded by our neighbors and family. I think relationship building is the foundation of this. I would imagine that I don't think there's a reality to where someone is going to tell their doctor at their yearly checkup that they started using tobacco or nicotine just out of the blue. I think these conversations happen when there are trusted adults, when there is a relationship there. Um, I think young men need good role models. And I think as men, as adults, as other parents in people's lives, we have a responsibility to talk to them, engage with them without judgment. Understanding that a young person has very, very different priorities than than I do as a 35-year-old man, and that's okay. So I think relationship building is the first step.
Yeah, I think that that is a great perspective. And that's, we've really moved away even from education and public health education to just spewing facts, to really having those conversations and, providing some context for things too, so that folks can think about it a little bit more. Where are some places, do either of you know, that you can go for more male-centered supportive conversations or where is there maybe some room for public health to do a little bit more and focusing on how to help young men navigate through all these challenges that they face, especially when they're not really talking about it and they're, no, that's not me, and I'm fine, I'm good. Where's the space for it, or if you know of resources out there, what do you recommend? This can go to
In
either
terms,
one of you.
Oh,
yeah, go
okay.
ahead, Justice.
Oh, all right. Thank you. Yeah, like Mrs. Letitia Smith, men church groups are really good. Um, And also just like with men church groups, also men that are in power or able to speak or have some sort of influence in general. With my school, when I spoke at the Renaissance assemblies, I was doing a multitude of things. I was trying to do. Well, I was trying to make a lot of influences. One, that it's okay to be involved with your school and it's not cringy or corny or anything of that nature. And two, that as a dude, it's okay to do that. It's okay to be involved and do things. You don't only have to play football and you don't have to, have all the clothes and stuff like that and just do nothing and be nonchalant and stuff like that. Because that's not cool. People don't like that in actuality. But um yeah, so I think that the people that are already in power, the people that already have influence, should speak up and should uh, encourage the young men or men with their actions, that uh, I guess to try to reform and get away from these toxic masculinist ideologies and just by their actions and many things serving because people like with toxic masculinity they think that serving is only for women with serving you can serve you can make food you can all types of things so um just that pretty much.
Thank you, Zach. I give you one more minute here. You got an idea you wanted to share?
Yeah, I think we were all on the same wavelength because I was going to say that, churches, especially in the South, especially in rural communities, play a very, very important role. I can think, I'm from rural West Texas, and I know that I went to uh, play basketball on Wednesday nights with like the church group, and it was a bunch of guys together, just having that community, and I think that is important. And also, I think, it's a big topic. Like, how do we start to approach a cultural transformation? I think it just has to do with in your daily life, call it out whenever you see something that is toxic or is not in alignment, that's not healthy or serving people, and try to model the behaviors that do.
It's great. Thank you so much. I mean, I think it's a definitely a needed topic, and even just us discussing it today, bringing it to the forefront can remind people that, hey, let's not forget about what guys are going through too, because there's challenges there that sometimes because we want you to be strong, we just forget about it. Can we go to the next slide? I really want to thank you both for being here, and for bringing the breadth of knowledge that you brought, Zach, from the clinical perspective, and then Justice, kind of that personal perspective and what it's been like for you and your journey. And of course, wish you well. I know you're going to do great things, and we are all here for you. Yeah, I know some of my folks who are participating too. They'd be happy to help you with whatever you need in your journey, but I'm here for you. Wanted to share with y'all too. Thank you. Yes, back at you. Wanted to share with you too some information that we have about assistance for quitting. We can go to the next slide to quitwithusla.org, and then you can text ready to 34191. And again, we'll send out the information. Haley's going to put the survey in the chat if she hasn't. Oh, she has. Um, and we would love for you to fill that out, please. It'll just take a minute or two. And just thank you again, Justice Bell. Thank you, Zach Perizzotti, with National Council for Mental Wellbeing. I am indebted to you both and very much appreciate you taking your time. And thank you for all who took the time out during their lunch hour to participate in this. If you have any questions too afterwards, please feel free to reach out to me. My email address is on the slide, and we're also happy to go and speak to groups as we do throughout the state, not just me, my whole team. We'll help wherever we can to help reduce these rates of tobacco use and nicotine use in the state of Louisiana and all around. So again, thank you all. Have a wonderful rest of your day.